I'm Rachel Horgan. Join me each episode as I sit down with a guest co-host covering the latest business stories in the Seattle area. We'll read the news so you don't have to. This is The Weekly. Welcome to The Weekly, everybody. If my voice sounds slightly different, that's because I lost it a little bit. I went to a wedding in Michigan. I had so much fun. It was with my best friends from college. Tell me why I decided to do the worm. And then I also was juggling beer cans. And I feel like if I just do enough tricks, people will like me. And I don't think I need to do that anymore. My arms were very sore. And I also, coming up, this next trip is going to be Boston. So I have another client that hired me to work a conference all week in Boston, and that'll be really fun. My last update, I'm going to be saying it every episode, is that I'm producing an event for queer women, October 18th. I'm going to put the link in the show notes. It's for anybody that can relate to this, but it's going to be in partnership with a podcast about coming out later in life, and we're going to have a sex expert on and just kind of have some relatable stories. So if that sounds interesting to you or somebody you know, please send it to them. All right. And that's that. I'm going to introduce my guest today, returning back to the studio by popular demand. We've got Rob Smith, executive editor for Formidable. Hi.
Hi, Rachel. Thanks for having me back. It's good to be here.
I know. So if you remember from before, he was my third guest ever. So I'm going to walk people through a little bit of your history to remind them. But you have this long history in journalism. You were the editor-in-chief at the Portland Business Journal. And then you moved into the editor-in-chief role here at the Puget Sound Business Journal. We didn't cross paths. We weren't there at the same time. And then you were the executive editor for the Seattle Magazine and Seattle Business Magazine, which is where you were at when we first talked, right? Right. And then now you've moved to this position at Formidable, which if some people are listening, Emily Parkhurst, she founded that company and she's been on the pod a couple times. So it's a media and membership company. So tell me about this change. This is super recent, like a month ago you moved over, right?
Yeah, it's been a little more than a month ago. Full disclosure, Emily Parkhurst is my wife. Mm-hmm. And she's been talking to me about coming to work with her for a long time now. And, a little bit of quick history. A lot of people don't realize Seattle Magazine actually went out of business for 2 months during the early on of the pandemic.
I didn't know that. Okay.
It was in Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which is reorganization. Mm-hmm. And at the time, the then CEO with the former owner of the company, which was based in Minneapolis, Tiger Oak Media, asked me and one of the salespeople to come back and try to save his company as we got out of Chapter 11 and then resume business operations. So we came back in the summer of 2020, and for a year and a half, I was the only editorial person on staff.
Whoa.
And we went from monthly to every other month. So then the magazine was purchased in December of 2021. And so that was a startup environment. So a couple of different things going on here. We kept the magazine alive. I'm very proud of that at a very difficult time. Although I think people have pretty much forgotten about the pandemic at this point. And then we built it up again in a startup environment. And then Formidable, which has been an entity for about a year and a half, this is an opportunity to do something a little bit different for me. Mm-hmm. And at my age, and Rachel, I've been doing this for way more years than I'm going to share with you.
Fine.
Re-energizing, revitalization, and I get a chance to be something that my wife and I are building together. So we're really excited about what's happening with Formidable. It's a startup environment. And I'm happy to say that we're cash flow positive right now, and we have a lot of things cooking. And I'm confident in the next 6 months or a year, you're going to be hearing a lot more about Formidable and what we're doing.
That's awesome. Well, and you've worked with your wife before at Puget Sound Business Journal. You were overlapping a little bit, right?
We did overlap a little bit.
So, I don't know if I could work with my partner, but you guys, I hang out with you a lot, and I'm not surprised you guys make it work really well.
Well, that's nice of you to say. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to talk about 5 stories today. One is a Formidable article. It's about basically how we're having a lot more IPOs, companies going public, but a lot less women involved in those companies going public. We'll dive into that. And then Tegna, a big media company, is being acquired. Then our third story, we'll talk about Alaska Airlines, a new rewards program. I think you've probably seen it, Atmos. And then also a facial recognition happening at the airport. So we're going to tie those two together. Our fourth story is about Uber Eats paying a $15 million settlement to Seattle. And our last story is going to be about Cannonball Arts. It opened in the former Bed Bath & Beyond building. So, Rob, are you ready to get into it?
Let's do it.
Okay, I might have you help explain some of these since you're also a journalist. So this is a Formidable article. So my takeaways from it, like I said, so IPO, if people don't know, stand for Initial Public Offering. And when people say, oh, a company went public, it's IPO. They're basically saying like Q2, there was an increase by like 16% of companies going public. And it's more tech firms, particularly AI, fintech, that sort of thing. But then when you dive deeper a little bit into analytics, of the 61 companies that filed in the first half of August, 88% had 0 or 1 woman on their board, and 93% had 0 or 1 woman in their C-suite. And you compare that to where we've been before, and in the past, we've kind of gone up to more like 12% of almost 350 directors and 11% of 200 executives. So we're hovering around the 11 to 12% of both the board and the directors. First, let's talk about initial opinions on this article, and then I want to talk about your perspective about writing through a women's lens.
Well, real quick, what this is, this guy who founded Free Float Analytics, his name is Damian Rallis. He combed through about 61 companies that filed IPO-related documents.
Okay.
They weren't IPOs. This was pre-IPO. Maybe they'll become public. Maybe they won't. But they're just kind of testing the waters.
I see.
And like you say, the vast majority of them had no women on the board of directors, while more than that had only 1 woman in the C-suite. So women represent about 30% of board members at Russell 3000 companies, for instance, and about the same amount of C-suite roles. So looking forward, this is really a huge fall off. And I think there's a lot of reasons for this. One of the reasons is, look what's happening at the national political level right now.
Right.
And President Trump has basically normalized this and says this is okay. And remember, NASDAQ had a rule recently that said companies must disclose their board gender and diversity statistics. And then it was going to take that a little bit farther. Then there was a lawsuit last fall that said this is unconstitutional. Goldman Sachs in 2020 said they would only invest in IPOs with significant women representation. Well, they recently pulled that back. And while they're saying all the right things, it's like, oh, well, we still value diversity and this is still important to us. There's no hard and fast rule at Goldman Sachs now. So I think this is kind of reflective of our national politics right now.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting, though, because it's also kind of shooting them in their foot because there's so much data that shows that businesses are more successful when they're more diverse and their boards are more diverse. So,
well, I think most investors, Rachel, have still come to expect companies with diverse boards and C-suites as part of the leadership team.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's important to note the bar is a little bit lower for pre-IPO companies.
Okay.
But I'm still surprised that they're not even at market norms.
Yeah.
They're not even at the 30%. And you sort of just said this, they're leaving out 50% of humanity here.
Right.
And I do think, especially here in Seattle, the investors that I talk with, they still value diversity in boards, but this is going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I'd like to think this is a temporary blip.
I would like to think that too. Yes. So let's talk about Formidable. The tagline is writing news through a woman's lens, and you're a man writing for them. And then you've previously worked at Puget Sound Business Journal, where the audience from when I was there, I think it was like average age, something like 55, 57, white male working in commercial real estate, mostly. So what has it been like to kind of shift writing for the audience? And can you give an example of how you would change a story to write for a different audience?
Well, and Seattle Magazine is just the opposite of the Business Journal. It skews, the demographics skew heavily women-oriented. Although I would say, and you probably noticed this too in your time at the Business Journal, it always surprised me how many people outside of that core demographic range read the publication. But I've been the editor of a publication directed at men, the editor of a publication basically directed at women. So an editor is basically a marketer.
Okay.
An editor is basically the quality control manager for the product that you produce. And what a lot of this comes down to is knowing, like for any company, journalism or whatever, you have to know the demographics. You have to know what your audience is and who you're writing toward. So this is news through a women's lens. And this is a little bit different than a lot of the other media, like the 19th, for instance, aimed at women. This is not just about women. And Emily is very steadfast in this. A lot of this is coverage of women and women's issues, but a lot of it's news that's interesting to women. So it can be news that's interesting to everybody. Retail, fashion, dining, and hospitality. So I don't think that I write anything differently than I would have otherwise. Now, the sourcing is different because I'm looking for different types of stories. And obviously, I've only been there for about a month.
Yeah.
There are going to be certain stories that I'm not going to feel comfortable writing because I don't think I can bring that perspective.
Sure.
But basically, again, it's just knowing who your audience is.
Yeah, I think some people might think, well, how do you change that when you say company A acquired company B? And I remember on Emily's episode, we were talking about when the title was The Sounders Bought the Rain. But the real story is that the ownership group that owns the Sounders now has added the Rain to their portfolio. But it was written as if the male soccer team bought the women's soccer team. And then there was another headline in a publication recently that said something about meet the VP that keeps up with Brad Smith. I texted her about it. I was like, I please, when I click on this link, please don't be a woman. I click on it and it was, this woman keeps up with Brad. And it's like, okay, why is this whole story centered around her? So I think when you look at it through that lens of who are we centering, what's the background information we're giving, those are kind of the changes that you as an editor or writer can make, right?
Well, and women's voices, and I read that article and it sparked quite a discussion in our household, the Brad Smith article. Women's voices are not often represented in media. And so something that's very important to Emily and to us is creating a safe space, not just in media, but in also convening groups of successful women.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. Anything else you want to say on either this article or kind of writing from a women's lens?
No, just we're having a good time. And again, you're going to be hearing a lot more from Formidable sooner rather than later.
I don't doubt it. All right. Our next story is about Tegna. I actually have not heard of this company, even though they're massive. So Tegna owns locally here in Seattle, King 5 and Kong. And Tegna is being bought by Nexstar Media Group for $6.2 billion. And Nexstar is the largest local television broadcaster in the U.S. It's expected to close later this year, so it hasn't quite happened yet. The FCC still needs to approve it. But what was interesting is that their U.S. Court of Appeals eliminated this rule. So the FCC had this rule where you couldn't own more than one of the top 4 stations for audience sharing in a single market. So they changed this rule and they're like, just kidding, you can buy whatever you want. And the National Association of Broadcasters is like, great, we love this because we want to be able to compete with other people like Google, YouTube, Netflix. All these people don't have these restrictions. And then the counter to that, Elizabeth Warren is saying, no one's asking for giant companies to combine, fire reporters, jack up prices. Like, these rules exist for a reason. There's rules to not have monopolies for a reason, and it protects us. So those were kind of the two arguments that I kind of researched. What do you, like, obviously you've been in media a long time. Do you think the deal should go through? Do you think the FCC should stop it? Do you think it's helpful to compete with the other media platforms?
Well, I don't think the FCC is going to stop it. Although there are a lot of regulatory and who's responsible for this? Congress has traditionally been responsible for some of this stuff. So to your point, this combined company would own 265 locations in 44 states.
Whoa.
They would have stations in 9 of the top 10 markets, reaching 80% of U.S. television households. The current FCC cap is 39%.
Oh, wow.
So, and I think Senator Warren is right. This is a threat to local journalism. Job cuts are inevitable. And Nexstar doesn't own any stations here in Seattle. Tegna owns, like you say, King and Kong. In Portland, Tegna owns both the local NBC affiliate and the local CBS affiliate. So what happens down there? Does that mean one of the news stations goes away? And I think this is going to be playing out in parts of the country. The other thing I think is interesting about this, Rachel, President Trump has already taken aim at media and TV stations he dislikes. Just look at the 60 Minutes lawsuit over the Kamala Harris interview and the settlement. With only one station controlling the news, I think it's going to be a lot easier for the federal government to control the national airwaves. And it's going to be easier for the administration to make threats on stations that it dislikes. So for a lot of reasons, I just don't think this is good. Look what's happened to print journalism. Look what's happened to radio. Now, in all fairness, what a lot of the advocates of this will say is there's already a lot of competition. There's all the streaming services. There's TikTok. There's YouTube TV. There's Hulu. They're saying it's so diluted that this doesn't really matter. I don't buy that argument, but that's what they're saying.
Yeah, I don't buy it. I think it gives a lot of validity and credibility when it's coming from a King 5 versus a TikTok content creator. And yeah, I agree with you that now the government only has to argue with Nexstar if they want any changes, and then boom, it's changed to everything. What do you think about, like, who should own media companies? Because at the end of the day, they have to make money, ideally. And we've got, billionaires owning media companies and these big monopolies now owning media companies. How do you see that impacting your journalistic decisions? And do you feel like the government should own them? Do you feel like, I don't know, any thoughts on that?
That's been a topic of conversation in journalism circles. Would you take some kind of government funding? And most of the publications and most of the journalists I know say other types of funding, like ProPublica. They do some great journalism, and it's public funding, but it's not it's not funding from the government.
Yeah.
Let me answer it this way. I have a good friend who's a reporter at the Washington Post. She's very dissatisfied with what's happening there right now. And she says it's very difficult to continue to be enthusiastic about what she does with the backdrop of what her company is doing. Should billionaires own media? That's not really for me to say. I just think that there have been a lot of missteps that the media has made the last 20 or 25 years. And I think if you could invent a time machine, 25 years ago, media would started charging for online articles. Now, hindsight's always 20/20. We can talk about that. But there is a threat to local journalism and newsroom staffing here.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. That's the thing is, like, I don't want this to happen, but I don't have a better solution, because media companies need money and they need to have owners, but you want them to be good owners, not.
Well, you want them to be dedicated to the community and with a passion for journalists. And I'm not saying that journalism as a profession is as important as like being a doctor or a teacher or a social worker. But the similarities are most journalists are mission driven.
Yeah.
And so this sort of gets in the way of journalism being mission driven in my mind.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, we're going to move on to the next story, which is Alaska Airlines. So they've got a new rewards program, and then they also have facial recognition. So kind of two separate stories here. You've probably seen it. They've been lots of billboards. I just went to the airport. It's all over the place. I've gotten emails about it. So they've launched Atmos Rewards. It's a play on the word atmosphere. And it's also going to rebrand their Alaska credit card. This comes after the merger with Hawaiian Airlines, I think we all remember. And they've also got all these new international routes. So they're coming up with this new rewards program. What is unique and different about this is that, so it starts in 2026, customers can choose how they want to accrue points, whether that's by distance traveled, price paid, or segments flown.
Yeah, number of times you fly.
Yes, yeah. And they can change whatever they choose. But they have to lock in for a year of, okay, I'm just going to go by distance traveled, and they can change once a year. This is interesting because I was watching this, it was a TikTok, but it was about how it shifted from many airlines were doing miles at first, and then they realized that it wasn't financially beneficial as much as going by how much you paid for a ticket to reward them for points. I guess we'll start there and we'll move to facial recognition later, but what are your initial thoughts on this deal? Well,
my first thought is I like that you're getting some of your news from TikTok.
It was one of those things where it's actually on YouTube, but then it was repurposed for TikTok. So it seemed like a legit thing, but I don't know.
Well, I think, the analysis that I understand about this, I mean, like you say, they've combined the Hawaiian miles. How are you going to figure out what's right for you? And I heard one analyst say this is going to take an advanced mathematics degree to figure it out because, like you say, you're locked in for a year. It's not going to be as simple as just saying, hey, I have some points. I have a companion fare. I'm going to take a friend or my partner to San Francisco for the weekend. You're going to be locked into whatever this is. So I think there's a lot of confusion about that. But let me just say something about Alaska. I think Alaska is a local treasure. It's the home-based airline. It's based in SeaTac. It's SeaTac's largest carrier. Alaska does a lot philanthropy-wise. Alaska does a lot for the community. And I think this is a little bit confusing to a lot of people. I think in a couple of years, it won't be. Yeah. People will figure it out. But for now, there's a lot of hand-wringing because nobody knows which program or which loyalty segment to do.
Yeah. Choices kind of stress people out. You think that you want choices, but actually you don't because it's too stressful to choose, to your point, which one to do. I'm also trying to think, like, this seems like it would benefit the consumer, whereas I'm confused because you wouldn't a business want to make the most money that they can. But when I was watching this thing, it was saying that at this point, airlines make a lot more out of their credit card and that whole thing than just like an individual person purchasing for a flight. So I don't know. Yeah, I'd be curious to know the numbers that they ran to come up with this plan and if it lasts.
Well, let me ask you. You said you just flew to Michigan. You're flying to Boston. If you have a choice, are you doing distance, dollars, or number of times you fly? Do you have any idea?
I have no idea.
Which is going to benefit you?
I have no idea. I think I would need to do some math problems, like you said. I need an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, so the other update for Alaska is that they're doing facial recognition at both the Seattle airport and the Portland airport. So it's over by when you do the bag drop. Have you done that? The bag drop thing?
I have.
Okay, so before you'd go in and the person would look at your ID, now it's a facial thing and you can just drop your bags and go. And it's part of their mission to get everybody out of bag check and into security within 5 minutes. I thought that was shocking. You can still use an agent if you want to help you, but it should make things go faster. So I'm all for it if it makes things go faster. I know it's like, okay, my data is probably somewhere and my face is probably somewhere, but if I can get on this plane faster, I'm personally fine with it.
I love this. How much time do we spend waiting in airports? How many hours of your life are you waiting for flights?
Yeah.
And it's important to know, too, that you can always opt out of this. You don't... They're not requiring you to do this if you're not comfortable with this. But, if you have the ID check and some of the enhanced travel capabilities right now where they're scanning your eyes, almost every time, and myself included, and I don't fly as much as you do, granted, but somebody's got to come over and help you because they're, making sure you're not too far and not too close.
Yeah.
So I think this is another one of those things that people are going to get more and more used to, but I see no downside to this.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to move things. And they added more bag drops because when I went there initially, there weren't that many and the lines were really long, but my mom said they added more. So that's good. All right. Anything else?
No.
Okay. Our fourth story, Uber Eats settlement. So Uber Eats agreed to pay $15 million to more than 16,000 delivery workers here in Seattle. This is related to the Independent Contractor Protections Ordinance that was passed in 2021. The city alleges a few things that Uber Eats did wrong, basically saying they didn't let their workers know about this boost program they were doing. They didn't pay for certain canceled orders. They didn't provide receipts for certain things and statements. So it was kind of this long list of you messed up. And the Ubers agreed to pay out this money. What I think is also interesting, I'm doing some more Googling, is that Seattle is the number one most expensive city for Uber rides. I looked at the Seattle Times article. They said for a 30-minute ride, it cost an average of $60. And that was really nice because I was feeling crazy because I like you said, I travel a lot for work. And I'm I feel like it's just so much more expensive in Seattle. And so that was reaffirming. The cheapest, if people are curious, is Indianapolis. But part of why this is so expensive, and this kind of relates to this whole relationship between Seattle, city of Seattle, and these delivery drivers and Uber Eats and things like that. A while back, they did this thing, the Fair Share Ordinance, where they were requiring a minimum pay per mile, per minute, and some benefits to Uber. The whole point was we want to pay these delivery workers and these drivers a fair wage. And so the city of Seattle stepped in and made some requirements. But then what happened, obviously, which I don't know if they didn't think this through, is that Uber Eats was sure, okay, the Ubers, the Grubhubs of the world were okay, we're just going to add a $10 fee to every order and then the consumer is going to pay it. F you, we're still going to make our profit. So it's just interesting because I think the city of Seattle thought that they could tell this company how to run their business and pay their workers fairly. And the business is no, I can do whatever I want, right?
Well, I think there's a couple of things to note here. Uber Eats is going to have to pay about 16,000 workers back pay.
Yeah.
And it's also important that the law that you just described, a lot of major municipalities in the first part of the pandemic forced these app-based delivery aggregators to raise pay, alter fee structures, and change their operations. Mm-hmm. And this is one of those things, and I think we see it a lot here in Seattle, where it's well-intentioned, it sounds very good on the surface, but there's a lot of unintended consequences that aren't really thought through. Mm-hmm. Case in point, we were going to order from Uber Eats to get Chinese food a few weeks ago. The bill was $62. With all the fees and everything else, it would have come close to $100.
Yes, I
know.
So
instead of paying that or even going to the restaurant, we just said, we're going to make something at home. We're just not going to go. And we have some friends who recently moved here from New York City. And they said food costs in general here, in restaurants, takeout, everything, was more expensive than it was in New York City. They were absolutely shocked. And I feel your pain personally on the Uber cost. I don't take a lot of Ubers. I have a 15-year-old son. He has Uber kids. That adds up pretty fast.
Yeah.
He's got $100 maximum per month, and that's sometimes 3 rides.
Yeah.
And it's done.
Yeah. I know I've brought back bringing friends to the airport and picking up friends from the airport. Remember when we used to do that back in the day? And then everyone just started taking Ubers, didn't want to bother their friends. And my friends and I have all started doing that again and paying it forward because it's a little $100 to go down to the airport. One of the other things I was going to mention about the Uber Eats thing is that down the line, it also affects all the restaurants. So now the restaurants, like that Chinese food that you decided not to order, now that Chinese restaurant is not getting that order. So it's also impacting all these local restaurants. And I think it was one of those things where it was a good intention, but we're having a lot of negative outcomes from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, our last article, Cannonball Arts. Why don't I turn it over to you? Do you want to kind of explain a little bit about what's going on?
Well, Cannonball Arts, it's described as a playground.
Oh.
Like, it's an entertainment center. It's kind of like a nightclub. It's like, not just an arts organization. So Cannonball Arts, which was launched by New Rising Sun, which is responsible for putting on the Bumbershoot. Are you going to Bumbershoot this weekend?
I'm not going this weekend, no. Well, maybe I should. Maybe.
And the Muckleshoot tribe is also involved in Cannonball Arts. It's a couple of things that I think are important to note, Rachel. This is in a former Bed Bath & Beyond space, a prime space on 3rd Avenue in downtown Seattle that's been vacant for 7 years.
Oh, 7, wow.
A couple things just about Cannonball Arts. I have not been yet. It just opened. Even the bathrooms are immersive experiences.
Ooh.
So the city required Cannonball Arts when they were developing this to add 24 bathrooms. So instead of just putting in bathrooms, they've turned them into these little pieces of art.
Wow.
The Vanishing Seattle, the group that is trying to preserve a lot of the city's history in the midst of unprecedented change. They designed a bathroom based on Seattle's history. There's a stall dedicated to Kurt Cobain.
Oh, funny.
So I just think this is so good for the city. And you may know, 3rd Avenue has long been considered the scourge of Seattle. And the Downtown Seattle Association, by the way, your podcast with John Scholes was excellent.
Oh, thank you.
John's a great guy.
He's so good, yes.
And they have, for years, unveiled these potential plans to remake 3rd Avenue. There's no funding associated with it, but this is right at the heart of 3rd Avenue. As you know, the city contributed some money to this. I see no downside to this. I think this is really good for the city and really good for downtown revitalization. Yeah,
in other episodes, I've ended on a really sad story, and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to end on a positive one, because I agree. I think it's incredible. And one thing I liked in the article was saying that Mayor Bruce Harrell said that they're pledging $11 million to support the arts community here in Seattle. And it's just, I think that's really important. Like you said, it's a collaboration with New Rising Sun and Muckleshoot Indian Tribe. Can I give you a little history on Bumbershoot? Well, you might know it, but...
Please.
So just because I'm like a event festival geek. So the city of Seattle owns, and it's this weekend, city of Seattle owns Bumbershoot. So in the 70s, it was this free community event. You move into the 1980s, and this company called One Reel, which is a nonprofit, took it over. That sound familiar, right? And then it was $2.50 a day, and Friday was free. And in the 1990s, One Reel is growing it and building it up, and it's getting bigger and bigger, and it's $10 a day. And then by the mid-2000s, One Reel is in like $1 million of debt, which when I'm reading this, I'm not super, super surprised, because ticket sales don't really pay for very much at any kind of event. It's all sponsorship. Ticket sales helps a little bit, but I'm not surprised $10 a day that he got in, or not, I don't know if it's he, but I think there was this guy CEO. One Reel got into $1 million in debt, and One Reel was like, we need help. So in 2015, AEG, so AEG Presents and AEG Live, you've probably heard of them. They have AEG come in and become their promoter. So AEG was like, we got you, we're going to pay off your debt. And they took over all the music programming. That's when they started raising prices to like the hundreds. I don't know, it was like $100, $200 tickets kind of thing. But they see attendance dropping, obviously, because the tickets are a little bit more expensive. So in 2019, they gave it a 4-year college try, and AEG is like, yeah, we're out. We're also losing $1 million a year. We can't do this. And then it's 2020, COVID happens. So from 2020 to 2022, they don't do Bumbershoot. And then I think it was in 2022, the city of Seattle put out an RFP, a request for proposal of like, does anybody want to put this on? And this company called New Rising Sun, which wasn't a company before, it was a couple local promoters that got together and created this organization, submitted to say like, we'll do it. And they also, when in their submission, I believe they were going to partner with another organization called Third Stone, is a nonprofit arm of it. And they got it. And I feel like I read an article where they were kind of surprised that they got it, because again, they were like a brand new organization trying to take it on. And they brought it back. So 2023 was the first year. So then 2024, and now here is 2025 coming up this weekend. And they've brought tickets back down to $50 a ticket, and that's with the help of Amazon. So that's the history of Bumbershoot.
The economics of things like Bumbershoot have shifted dramatically over the years. It used to be when it was free or that, they asked for a donation, they had these national bands. These huge that you can just go from stage to stage and see, Patti Smith and Modest Mouse and Little Feat. Now, you look at the acts now, they're a little bit scaled back because of the economics, to your point.
It's expensive.
But Bumbershoot's a Seattle treasure. It's a Seattle history, and I'm so thankful that it's still going on. Parkhurst is going to hear this, so I need to make sure that I don't get in trouble
I'm
with the boss.
motivated every day when I get to work for Formidable.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait for Monday morning on Friday night. No, but seriously, I go to the gym a lot.
Okay.
I do a lot of deep breathing exercises. I go for a walk around the block, especially working remotely, which we pretty much done. I should say I hated working remotely in the beginning. And now I can't imagine going into an office 5 days a week again. So I'm isolated, like a lot of us are. I'm in my office, so I like to go out, just walk around the block, maybe go to the store, talk to somebody outside of the job.
Yeah.
So that's primarily what I do. But honestly, I've loved what I've done for almost 40 years, and I still love it. I get paid to be nosy. I can't imagine doing anything else.
Oh, well, that's a great way to end. Thank you, Rob, for spending time with me. It's good to see you again.
Thanks for having me back, Rachel. This is great.
This has been The Weekly, with production assistance from Nick Patry. If you liked what you heard, rate us and write a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. We love listener feedback, so if you have any story suggestions, comments, or complaints, email us at info@theweeklyseattle.com. Make sure to check back next Sunday for the latest local business news. We'll see you next time.